Welcome to Bliss Boss Talks. I'm your host, Jaya Rose, a life coach, speaker, doTERRA team leader, and a mama of two free-spirited girls. And you are in the right place if you are ready to live your dreams without sacrificing your needs. I'm going to be talking to other soulful leaders who are walking the talk, and we are touching on all things personal development, spirituality, and what it really takes to be the boss of your bliss. Are you ready? Let's go. Hey everybody, welcome back to Bliss Boss Talks. I am so excited to have Kevin on the show today. He is just amazing. You're going to see, you're going to feel it the second he starts speaking. So no pressure, Kevin. How's it going?
Wow, let me start speaking. Thank you for that intro, Jaya. It's such an honor and a blissful pleasure to be here.
Ooh, so good. Bliss Boss Talks. We are the Bliss Bosses. The nature of this show is really about that. Is about becoming the boss of your bliss, which is like so multidimensional and so many layers to that. And I feel like the thing that I just love so much about you is your authenticity. Like, do people tell you that a lot?
I've heard it once or twice.
Yeah, okay. Because it's so easy to show up online with what we think everybody wants and in these masks, with these masks on. And I just feel like you cut through that. And I know that you were doing a lot of work around masculinity and the archetypes. And I love that. And I also know you have a lot more to share. So where are you now? We could start with your whole story, but I also feel like where you are now, and I know you've just gone through a lot of transition. Like, are you willing to share a little bit about that?
Totally. And as we were just speaking about, and what is most raw for me right now is a bit of a creative rebirth. And, anyone following my content saw that, I publicly, was sharing difficulties I was also having in my relationship. And, now I see how much that's been tied into my creativity and how both of them, like the Phoenix, got very draining and out of alignment I was finding. And so a lot of the burning and the regeneration has been happening. And, pieces of this are the men's work I've been doing, which it's funny. They don't tell you when you become a personal development, transformational, whatever you want to call it, coach or influencer, that the most work is actually going to be done by you, and it's going to transform you as well. And I've met that head on this year in a way that I've never done it since 3 years. I've been leading events and coaching and all that. And really it's been through the content. Like I am a creative person. So, I have to create from authenticity, and that's where the magic is. Like if I come out of authenticity or out of alignment, it doesn't hit, and actually no one enjoys it because it shines through, especially in my words and my voice on camera. So the long story short, the past 2 months, I've been shown through friends, through lovers, and through all the beautiful people on the internet, all the ways I wasn't showing up. And that's been pretty brutal in a good way.
So can you give us an example?
Well, so a lot of it came through in my romantic relationship with amazing queen, which I'm happy to say that we are, together, we're in relationship, and we're creating new agreements and moving into that. But she being, and anyone that's been in love or is in love or married knows that your partner is this mirror and nothing escapes, especially if you're in a container of truth and that you want to be true, tell the truth with each other, which I think is the ultimate agreement to have. I was kind of riding this wave of content. People might have seen I had a pretty viral video in January around masculinity, the old paradigm dying, and really feeling passionate about that, and just kind of rode that wind. And, making content, having a lot of abundance, a lot of celebration around that, and getting to a point where my content creation and what I was speaking to and a lot of people resonating with outpaced my own level of growth. And so at some point I kind of woke up and was being called out both by her in this relationship and by messages and other mentors of mine and trolls, shout out and love to internet trolls. They actually can teach you a lot. They can teach you a lot in the comment section. How this persona I was online, although powerful and I was, enjoying it, I wasn't matching up to my actual life and how I was showing up in relationships and in person. And, this is a painful realization for me. And this coincided with a lot of other things, as the universe does, threw a lot of it at me at once. My band, my brothers who I've been living with, a part of a brand called Mystic Misfit, that was dissolving and we were all separating to go our different ways for a bit. I also got physically sick. I just had like this kind of adrenal crash this summer, right around the time of all those eclipses and wormholes and full moons, if you follow all that stuff. I was very much laid low and humbled. Like physically, my body was like, you must slow down. And I honestly, I was, to be vulnerable, I was having like anxiety, like mild anxiety attacks and this low level of physical anxiety every morning. And what it led me to was digital detox and fully stepping out of creating content, even stepping out of coaching for a short season to, be with myself. And that was a lot of time in nature. Asking for help for me was really big. Like actually seeing other coaches and mentors and healers, which is something, in the past, it was just a luxury and it became a necessity at this point. And all of that, leading me down, I'm very deep into the archetypal work, the work of Carl Jung, the creative imagination, and how your dreams, your creativity, your thoughts and words are a personal mythology. And my mythology was that of going into the underworld for a time and going underground and into the cave. A good way to think about it is the cave, right? And going into that is very humbling. It's kind of like in Star Wars where Luke goes into that really dark cave when he's training with Yoda, right?
Totally.
Faces his father and his fears. That was George Lucas's way of expressing this cycle.
The dark night of the soul is what I call it.
Bingo.
Well, I feel like 'tis the season in a lot of ways and for a lot of people. And so I love that you're speaking to it from a level of understanding. And I know that you have a little bit of that hindsight, which is always so helpful. But I also know that when you were in it, you still had that because that's the spiritual viewpoint, right? The idea that let me recognize that this is uncomfortable. And also let me continue to step forward into it because this is what's laid out in the pathway. And I know that a lot of the women, mostly women, but hopefully some men now that you're on, are listening to this and maybe some of the feelings and emotions that come up, like you mentioned, anxiety, which is so powerful because, I don't know anybody in this modern day that doesn't dance with anxiety sometimes.
Right.
And these other feelings of like stuckness or confusion. And I think, because I know women more, and I'd love to know what you think, how this maybe shows up differently if it does for men, this idea that if we aren't still in alignment with what we had chosen, maybe even you chose it a month ago, a day ago, and when you're not in alignment with it anymore, it needs to be let go of. And yet I know women put a lot of judgment on that around failure and use it as evidence to say, oh, look, I really wasn't even an expert, or to knock themselves down. And so I wonder for you how you dealt with that and if you'd be willing to speak to that a little bit.
Totally. It's, for me, the expert mentality and that kind of, persona, again, it comes back to this persona, which persona isn't a bad thing, right? Neither is ego. Like they're actually very functional to be in civilization and to be in community and tribe. But it's because it's knowing when to pick that up and put that down. Yes. For example, if you're in a vulnerable space like I was, and it's funny because you can go back into my live videos and see when I was in this space and I was still trying to just do business as usual. Yeah. So I'd still go Facebook Live or still hop on a client call or a webinar and just act in my normal, kind of high energy self and try to fake it till I make it. But, if you're really looking, you can see that I'm struggling and I don't have the energy. And so it took me a little bit of a calibration to admit that, and admit it to myself, because people would call me out on it. Like, it was actually pretty phenomenal. I was so blessed to have so many people. A lot of them I perceive, were women, more intuitive or just been followers for a long time. And they read it on me instantly. I started getting all these messages like, hey, is something up? Is something off? You feel low? Or like, I've had this feeling about you today about this. And like, I started piling up, and I was like, dear Lord, it's not just me. It's not just in my head. Like, this is a real feeling. And, taking the time to admit, yeah, I'm anxious. I do not feel in alignment. I need to slow down. Mm-hmm. Even though, being an entrepreneur, as you know, Jaya, like, all you want to do is speed up. Like, I want to pedal to the metal. I had momentum. A launch coming up. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Let me just keep my momentum, come hell or high water. And that wasn't serving. And then like I mentioned, what really put the brakes on was my body. My body submitted me. I got, flu-like symptoms and was in bed for 2 days at the height of this, physically just like, oh yeah, you're done. You need to sit down and lay down and, set things straight.
Yeah. And that's so often what happens. I mean, I think that's the nature of the culture we live in. That's like stress, anxiety, not really focusing on our soul's work, and illness is just a total norm. Like, it's a total norm in our society. So you're noticing that's because you're in a healthy state and you're using that as awareness. And so I think it's such a good lesson for all of us. And I definitely do the same thing, that when I get sick, I take it as a lesson, not as something bad necessarily, except it definitely can suck while it's happening. But it's like, though, that is a teacher. It's teaching you something. And I feel like as we evolve and as people evolve and get on a more spiritual path, that's such an amazing part of it, right? For people to be able to see what's happening to their body as an alarm system, or as an indicator that something is happening really in our soul.
Right. And that's a beautiful perspective that I, want to celebrate right now is, emotions and these deep inner knowings are the language of the soul, and it comes through the body. It does come through the body. I've heard, maybe ultra spiritual, whatever you want to call it, woo-woo people say this, and I'm starting to see that I really believe it, even in my skeptical mind. The soul's last option to get your attention is to physically have something manifest, right?
Yeah. So it's like, can you pick it up? I mean, it will initiate as a thought, right? You're like, I think this way. Am I going to listen? And so often when we're so used to just ignoring our thoughts, right? Because for a lot of people, most of them are negative anyway. And they're just so subconscious. And so, yeah, I love that it's like, no, now it's screaming, like your soul screaming at you. Yeah, I fully am on board with that. So I know you just said that you had a skeptical mind, and I remember another conversation with you talking about your actual schooling and like where you began thinking about the mind and stuff. So will you share with us some of that, where you began your actual journey into learning about mindset and psychology, right?
Yeah, of course. So glad you asked. That's what actually got me into all this trouble, is with, the spiritual path or the transformative path, was my mind. When we spoke, I was actually in Austin, where I went to school. I went to University of Texas there. And, I got so into psychology and philosophy, and that's what I majored in as an undergrad, and was dead set, as I was sharing with you, on going for my PhD. And both in research and social and evolutionary psychology, which is so fascinating, how much is carried over from primate culture, and also how the human brain has evolved. And then also on the other side, Jungian psychoanalysis was highly of interest to me. Dream work, working with archetypes, going into the collective unconscious, and, the anima animus, these very potent, residues that exist in the human mind that are playing out largely at an unconscious level. Jung has a bomber of a quote that, the unconscious will rule your life, and you will call it fate until you make it conscious. And these patterns and these residues, and often traumas, because they have a lot of energy, because they're there to protect us, the reactions to them, really, they sent me on this path of wanting to understand human behavior and the mind. And I came with great skepticism.
Hey, so sorry to interrupt. I hope you're loving this episode, and make sure to stick around for the rest of it. I just wanted to pop in and let you know that I have a beautiful free resource for you. All you need to do is head over to thejayarose.com and scroll down till you see the invitation to download the Bold Self Playbook. In this playbook, I walk you through the 5 mindset principles that will help you embody your most powerful self and magnetize your dreams. This is a game changer, and you must have these 5 mindset practices and principles in place to really take it to the next level and truly be embodying that version of yourself you're ready to step into. So head on over to thejayarose.com and download it. Can't wait to hear what you think, and keep on listening.
Great skepticism for religion. I was raised Roman Catholic. And then I started having skepticism of the establishment, was my political leader telling me the truth? And what about all this stuff with, war and oil and the economic motivations for social constructs? And so I just kept going down this rabbit hole. And again, through trauma is how I found my way out, so to speak, applying for PhD programs, being a diligent, soon to be graduated undergraduate student, and being in a relationship. I had my heart broken on a very intense level. My high school sweetheart actually cheated on me. And this kind of sent me in a downward spiral that initiated my spiritual path, because my mind had no solution and no protection, no recourse. And this is my gateway was yoga. So I took a course with one of my philosophy professors on Eastern philosophy, and we read, Patanjali and Nagarjuna and the Yoga Sutras and the Mahabharata and all this stuff. And I just got really interested in it. Went to my first yoga class, went to my first meditation class soon after. And this started a whole spiral in my journey where, fast forward, I ended up leaving Texas, completely abandoning grad school, moving to California, working at the university for a time, actually in the arts division, switching over to arts from science, and then doing a bit of a pilgrimage and journey through Southeast Asia. So I backpacked Southeast Asia, Nepal, India, studied yoga, studied meditation, and went completely the opposite, right? Instead of full behavioral science, I was like going on the mystic yogi path, and I started educating myself about all these traditions. And now I find myself somewhere in between.
Yeah. That seems like, right.
Right.
Because you're coaching, and you are helping people with behavior and with their mind and the way that they're approaching life, right?
Totally. I found that's a unique pathway that exists in personal development that I love, is the ability to apply psychological principles and the gems from, the more mystical side of things, understanding energy, understanding intention and mindset, things that, the psychologists in the laboratories haven't quite caught up to yet. They can't point to this and say, this is what causes this. But as we know, as entrepreneurs, there's a magic that exists in the grit and the hustle and the dedication to value and the motivation to serve that does border on, science and mysticism.
Yeah. I feel like maybe it's just from my viewpoint, which I'm sure it is, that I am like very grounded. I'm very spiritual and very grounded. And I feel like it's like, well, I love the concepts of spirituality because those are what help me in my daily life get out of the shit show, right? It's like, let me rise above it. And that's what we constantly do. I feel like anybody who I know who's happy in their life is rising above a lot of shit all the time.
Right.
And at the same time, then it's like, well, the question comes for me, it's like, well, then what are the practices? What are the practical applications of rising above it? Because that's an awesome concept. And I feel like this is really what people need is people talking to them on a real level. Like I am not a guru,
Right.
and I love that you have your humbleness about that, because you have had viral videos. You do have a lot of people who follow your content. And then you also have this deep honor of that, obviously from the way you're talking about how you cared what their reflection was on you.
Right.
And, leadership is changing. Like we can look at the gurus of, and I do in quotes, of spiritual and personal development, and clearly say that the path that they took to get there will not get us there.
Right. Right. That's a great point.
Right. And it's like, we are the new generation of thought leaders. And if we choose it, if you, like, I truly believe if you have a message and a calling to both serve and lead, then like, this is the time to do it, because
it's never been more accessible.
It's never been more accessible and needed.
Right. At the same time, that's a very interesting dichotomy we're seeing. And there's a beautiful quote, like the gatekeepers have left the gates. Like, back in the day, the Gutenberg Bible had to be printed on the first printing press, and only the elite had access to written text. The internet has thrown the gates open. So anyone with an internet connection and, food and water to survive can educate themselves on anything and can be their own leader and have their own, impact on the world. And, this is funny. This mastermind I just came from in New Mexico is very radical and unstructured. It's called Collective Legacy. It's basically trying to bridge, 7-figure entrepreneurs and philanthropists with Native elders and youth councils, and figuring out like the whole spectrum of regenerative entrepreneurship and leadership. And a big term there, to speak to what you're intimating, is this term surrendered leadership. So being a leader, because a leader is someone that, not only knows what to do, but does it.
Yeah.
And the degree to which they're in integrity, I think, is the degree to which they'll be successful in this new paradigm.
Yes. Oh, let's say it again. Say it again.
The degree to which a leader can stay and hold integrity is the degree to which they will continue to be seen as a leader in the new paradigm.
Yes.
Because, in the old paradigm, we do come from a very conditioned model of the white man at the front of the room is who we listen to. And they have authority and this power. And even for women, like, the woman at the front of the room that has this message is the one we're going to listen to. It's kind of the alpha chimp, right? To bring in that primate psychology. We like to have a centralized leader. And a lot of the tactics, as we're finding, as all these documents and emails and leaks and whistleblowers keep happening, and I believe we will keep seeing this as time goes on. A lot of them took shortcuts to get there, or were out of integrity, and just were, they were served a purpose, because they did have positive effects, and the old paradigm of leadership was effective to get us to this point. But I think now, transparency, vulnerability, integrity are really the core values. Those are the ones that are going to continue to receive attention and support and monetary, abundance, because that's what's needed. And that's something you brought up, is the true leader is a servant. It's not about them or their personality or their ego construct. It's how is the best way to serve. And so if the collective's demanding it and yearning for it, the new leaders are going to answer that call.
It's so powerful. So I know that you have a lot of work under your belt around the masculine, the toxic masculinity, and the divine masculine. And I don't think we have to completely go there right now, but the angle that I was hoping to touch on is really about relationship, because so many of the women who tend to follow me and listen probably right now are listening, hello, to us, are people who are potentially married to a man who is definitely a few steps behind in terms of personal development, spirituality, and their growth. And I know that there may be women who are with other women. And so if this applies to that, like it covers everything. And I know for me, I'm married to a man, and a lot of the women who follow me are as well, and have a lot of trouble dealing with it.
Sure.
Figuring out. And so I'll just ask you a direct question first, and then I just would love your insights on it. obviously need to allow ourselves to let go of all of our attachments to rise, right? Like we are not rising and dragging someone along with us. That's not happening. That doesn't work.
Right.
And simultaneously, I have found that there's a lot of fear around like, what's going to happen if I go to the next level? What's going to happen if I allow myself to grow and change when I know he's not going to, or I, at least from my perspective right now, don't think he will. Like, what do you have any insight on how we can show up in that for ourselves and then also still hold the space for the men to rise too?
Yeah, this is really the hot topic. And it's so funny. Earlier today with friends and allies here in Venice, we were having these conversations, these exact conversations. And because of Me Too, because of the rising that is happening for the feminine and the masculine, it's just, I think their rates, much like puberty, women can go really far, really fast for different reasons. And I won't get into all like the biological, sociological, factors at play, but I can only speak about my direct experience. As a man in relationship, I have felt in my own relationships and the clients I've served and the people and circles I'm in, as the feminine becomes unbridled and is allowed to step into their full majesty. And this is involving a lot of things because, two of the biggest taboos and where a lot of energy goes and are pretty important to this conversation are sex and money. Sexual energy, creative energy, and also money, abundance, financial security. Because women have been kept out of the workplace in a lot of respects, or there's, pay gaps, and because female sexuality, and really sexuality itself, this goes deep into the masculine too, has been repressed because of Christian culture and how we inherit that tradition in America, whether you like it or not. The country was built in this way. And those two factors, right, having so much energy, we're relearning how to navigate it. And to speak to relationship, I mean, as a man, and this is tough because there's like two, I feel like, strategies here that we employ, or I employ. I'll talk about myself. One is the problem solver, right? So I want to be the problem solver. I just want to fix it. If my partner comes to me with emotional turmoil, with trouble at work, with problems in the relationship, a temptation can be to jump straight into fixing and problem solving. And, this can be useful, but a lot of the time, what does the female or the feminine actually want? They want to be fully heard in presence and with a tenderness and fully received. And actually, they don't need a solution. I've found this many times. A solution isn't necessarily what's called for. What's called for is presence and, connection, the intimacy that's created there. And on the extreme side, right, of one, the problem solver is cold, emotionless, just wants to solve the problem and move on. Like, isn't this marriage good enough, honey? Isn't this relationship good enough? We fix that, right? Whatever workshop we got to go to. That's one extreme. The other extreme is, what I've seen in myself, but also in men I serve, is the impotence and the danger in the spiritual communities to go completely the other way and be somewhat of a pushover, right? And not stand in your power as a man and not be in that protector energy, not be in that leadership energy, which is, no matter if you're a woman and a woman or a man and a man, the yin and yang poles, the masculine and feminine, it requires tension and contrast to actually create that spark of energy and attraction. And I invite anyone who disagrees to really look deeply, even in same-sex couples. There has to be this yin and yang dynamic. And it's a dance. It is dynamic and it changes. And so what I see with women rising up, claiming their power, deprogramming, banding together, and being public about the trauma that's very real and needs to be honored and addressed. Men can either be afraid of this and bypass it and stay small, or they can prematurely jump into this like spiritual role of receiving it and trying to be apologetic and actually go the other way. And actually neither is going to serve us, because we don't want a matriarchy. We don't want to have women assert dominance now. It's like, well, the patriarchy, you know, really cooped it. So now you guys got to, you know, grovel and just say, I'm sorry. And now you're the,
and listen to us talk.
Right. And there's a way in which we can rise to meet one another. Mm-hmm. And that's what I really focus on in my men's work, in my one-on-one coaching work with men, is you still got to be a hunter. I think about it as like a hunter and a protector. You still got to be a guardian, and you still got to have that powerful energy of creating boundaries, creating leadership, using your intellect to hold the container for certain things. But you also have to understand, and I've learned this the hard way in being in an intimate relationship, you know, so many lessons of learning how to be tender as well, and be willing to let down my guard and be in surrender and trust, and let the feminine teach me as well. Mm-hmm. And the trick is to know when to do which. That's the one I haven't fully figured out. That's a experimental front line right now.
Right. It sounds so much like being embodied both. And I know I've done my own work around this. And I would say that I kind of am a very like 50-50 person, where I don't know if you feel that, or I'm not like masculine, but I have the action.
Right. I see that. I see that in you.
The leader, but then I also very much surrender and trust and have the feminine. And so in coming in more fully to my own power and stripping back the layers that I've allowed to be really in front of it, you know, like taking the forefront, it really has been this more balancing act of like, oh, how do I fully emerge as this really powerful leader that has both the feminine and the masculine? And I feel like that's what we are being called to do. Like, just to kind of say back to you what I heard you say about us rising, there is this idea of like women are rising. And you hear it all the time, you know, it's like most of the women in any of the Facebook groups I look at, any of the groups, they're all women. Like there's just women are rising. And I hear you though, that it's like, yeah, that's not fully the answer. Right. Because we are a society and beings that need each other. Like this is, that's legit. We aren't going very far without each other. No. So it's like, I think the question becomes, and the answer is like the question and the answer all in one, is like, we have to do our own work to peel back the layers, because underneath it all, we all are balanced beings. Right. I believe. Don't you think?
That's ideal, is to have an inner balance of masculine and feminine energy inside of you. Or another way to think about it is thought and feeling, right? Or mind and emotion. This is so important to understand, and this is what I'm realizing about intimate relationships, because this is good kind of the situation or circumstance it most manifests. But if you are not fully balanced inside of yourself, and like for me, for example, if I'm not aware of my inner feminine nature and I'm not engaging with it in a healthy way, then when I go to a relationship and to a partner, all of those things in my unconscious, or shadow, shall we say, I'll project onto her and try to get her to feel and hold space for and process for me. And vice versa. Her inner masculine energy, you know, will do that same dance with me. And this is when you see a codependent, volatile, triggering, and you get into loops. You get into these loops of behavior. You know, he always does this. He doesn't care about me. He's insensitive. She always is emotionally in her storm. She doesn't understand. Does she see how much hard work I put in? And I, you know, I wasn't in a right. Yeah. And we all saw this from our parents. We're all doing the best we can. This is some transmitted stuff from generations. You know, none of the men and women in my family line, to my knowledge, you know, love them all. God bless them. Long live Texas. But at the same time, like none of them gave me a template to figure this out. I've had to figure it out myself through a lot of pain and a lot of breakups.
And a lot of willingness too.
Right.
Yeah, it's so true. I mean, it is the new paradigm. Let's get it straight. And that's the entire reason this is of any value at all. Otherwise, this would just be a big waste of time, because we should be waiting in the bread lines, because we're about to be hungry tonight. right? I mean,
right.
this is the reality of the times we live in, that it is more valuable right now for you, the listeners, to be listening to this and to be integrating a new way, really, than anything else. Because the strategy and all of the busy work that we do in our lives is not what's going to help us thrive in this new paradigm. There's just so much more possible for us. And I believe it takes this, like what we're talking about right here, this embodiment of our full power. Like that's it.
Right.
It's so simple.
That's it. It's coming fully online. This is the way we can rise with the feminine as men. And I think y'all, if I can y'all on y'all, as the feminine can help us stay in power and rise together, is owning it and like lead with the transparency and honesty, but also keep boundaries. This is a big thing I see with, you know, a lot of the wounding. I was talking with my brother Ryan about this on camera earlier, how all these posts about Me Too and sexual trauma and the patriarchy just create these very violent, toxic conversations, because it's all triggering and wounding, and it's people overstepping each other's boundaries, when actually the way we do this is we come into sovereignty. Own your shit and keep it in your boundary and container, but don't project your shit onto others, and honor their boundary and container. That's the only way we can have grounded conversations about this stuff, because the emotions are so volatile. And this goes for anyone in a partnership, in a marriage, in a relationship, just started dating, whatever it is. If you, the degree to which you can hold your own stuff in integrity and sovereignty, and then meet them in that same place, that's how your man, you know, to these women you're speaking of, you know, that's how your man's going to rise to meet you. The masculine actually will respond to competition. And so if you hold your space and energetically are inviting him and calling him up, don't call him out and, like, you know, rub his nose in it, call him up. Invite him through your sensuality, but also through your power and your groundedness, to rise to meet you. And he will, like, it's in his biology, it's in his DNA to do that, because that's the masculine, right? To get a little, you know, biological on you. The masculine is the cheaper or expendable gamete, right? There's millions of sperm involved in a conception, but only one egg. The egg is the very valuable and, you know, precious commodity, and nature has set it up this way. It's not a fluke that, you know, men compete and rise to various levels of influence, dominance, power in the current system, and then women are choosy maters with that. And, you know, the paradigm's shifting rapidly. That's been the way it's been, but there is a golden thread here that, you know, we're not just going to tear down the system and start over with women as the queens. It's like, no, we need to reignite the kings and dethrone these tyrants that are actually living inside of us. It's not Donald Trump that's fucking up your life with the patriarchy. It's the part of you that has been complicit with that.
Yep. And quiet.
Yes.
I hear that. Yeah. I feel like, I know this so well. Like, it's so personal because this is my third marriage. So I've done it a lot. I've had 2 5 years and now going on to 7. So, I mean, I've been married for 17 years, just 3 different times. And it's awesome though, to have all that experience. It really is. And it's really, like what you're saying, this, something came to me while you were talking about leading. Like, it's like to lead, and that's what the women are doing. Like, we're not, like you said, it's not just going to be overthrow everything and now it's just all queens. It is about us leading though. So, like, if you've woken up and you're like, everyone around me is toxic and sick, and I need to heal myself in order to help others heal, which is happening everywhere. Right. This is just people waking up in where they are. And it's like, this is the where to break the chains of codependence that you talked about right there. Like, I think that's the first place to start, that this journey is about you and your healing, and to not expect that anybody's going to heal at the same rate as you. And simultaneously that your healing and the embodiment of that and how you show up will heal other people. It will. It's just, you have to take that responsibility that it's yours to do. And I think that's where it gets
100%.
like a hiccup, right? It's like we start to be woke and feel like, well, why isn't he doing it too? And the truth is he may never, and that may be true, but he also may next week, and it definitely you'll influence him. And one of the best ways I know to influence is to lead, and to also, like you said, like call up. When we want to influence somebody, we don't like call them out and tell them how they're messing up. And, you don't
shame them. Yeah.
No, you don't shame them. You call them up and you show them what's possible through you being the person of possibility.
Right. That's a great point. It's all about positive reinforcement.
Yeah.
It's just like, there's things you can learn from, to go back to the behavior, model. It's, if you want to see more of his awakened power and his depth of presence and his masculine power that's not coming from an old paradigm, you need to celebrate it and invite him up into that,
Yeah. Yep.
And you're not going to do it by shaming him and calling out his negative aspects when they appear. You don't need to hold space for them either. You don't have to put up with them. And this is where that clear communication and authenticity comes in, right? That power and presence of, this is how this is making me feel, or I perceive, or I am really not feeling, held. I'm not feeling safe when you act this way, instead of you always do that and you're like an asshole. And, it is leading. You're nailing it. You're nailing it. If the woman is more on the level, lead.
Yep.
If you don't shed light and consciousness and talk about something, where does it go? It becomes repressed, and it goes into the shadow, into the unconscious. And it becomes a taboo because it has all of that psychic energy and physical energy. Yeah. So what you're seeing happen on a big stage, I believe, and men like your husband and myself and a lot of us, I wasn't raised in these conscious ways. Yeah. I came to it later in life through, my own journey. There needs to be more spaces of opening this conversation in a very grounded and healthy way. And there are models, Portugal and Nordic countries, Sweden, Switzerland, Amsterdam, they have more instituted sexual education for young men and women around contraception, around consent, around, how to actually engage in this stuff. But if the way you're learning about sex is through pornography, and the way you're learning about relationships is the locker room, or for women it's the same. Then we shouldn't be that surprised when you see this playing out on a big scale, and in our personal relationships and bedrooms as well.
Yeah, gosh, it's huge. All right, Kevin. So this is obviously a conversation that, like we were just saying, can go on and on and on, and it should, right? But also, I don't know. I know you work with people, and I know you talk about this a lot. But if someone was to come to you and just say, what can I start doing? Like, how do I make a shift? How do I break out of this cycle of what you were describing, like judging him for not doing it, or judging myself, or just like embodying more your more balanced feminine and masculine? What would you say?
Yeah, I mean, for me, a lot of that path has, as a man, just like learning all the ways in which I am unconsciously contributing, even though I'm on a conscious path, and that can be somewhat painful. And this is self-inquiry and getting really radically honest with yourself. Like, if this was my daughter, my mother, my lover, would I talk like this about that woman in front of the guys, by myself? That's a big step. And then you can bring that energy back into your relationship, because you've become aware of it and started to practice it in your normal life. It's not just when your girlfriend or wife's mad at you that suddenly you know about all these things. You're actually looking at them in your daily life.
That's like a big one. I love that.
Right. And also, this is just near and dear to me because I'm, committed to facilitating this, and also been in a lot of them recently. Men's circles. And for women, women's circles. It's very important that men and women gather together and hold sacred containers on these topics. A video I made, and a big idea that I've applied with great effectiveness in my intimate relationship, is your girlfriend, your wife, is not your therapist, and vice versa. There's certain things that are meant to be held among men and certain things that are meant to be held among women. And indigenous cultures understood this. And they had lodge and ceremony for just men and just women. And then they come back together in celebration and truth. And so, you know, for all the men out there, all the husbands that may be listening to this and their wives, I really invite them to, you know, do this. Don't just go to the bar with the boys. Don't just do your usual BS. Like, sit in vulnerability and strength and talk about this stuff and connect and do things together. Use nature. Like, nature is, always go back to nature. Like, men in wilderness settings sharing truth around a fire. I mean, that's my ideal.
I love that.
I can bring that in.
So good. So you'll let me know when you're hosting one of those. And can I come? So good. So you're on the social medias, I assume?
I am. I'm on all the social medias. YouTube, Instagram, Facebook are my mains. And it's just my name. So at Kevin Orosz or Oroszlán, Oroszlán, which is actually lion in Hungarian. It's a little title I've adopted because lion's all about that grounded masculinity and that true king, right? I'm talking about Mufasa, not Scar, for those of you listening.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to be here and getting down on the Bliss Boss Talks.
Jaya, I so appreciate you for inviting me. I so appreciate our dynamic and this very juicy conversation that, as you said, could go on forever.
Yes, I just imagine us connecting again, like in a yurt, and really just continuing on or just being silly, you know, that would be so fun. Totally.
Maybe there's men's and women's retreats in our future. Who knows? I'm very open to that.
Right. Yeah. Everything is open. So thank you so much. And yeah, you guys, if you love this, make sure to follow Kevin on Instagram and then put this up on your stories, and I'm sure we'll both share it out. But it's just so good to share this, and I know for sure that this is going to be valuable for so many people. So make sure to share it out. And thanks, Kevin. I'll see you really soon, I hope, and I'll see everybody else next time on Bliss Boss Talks. Yay. Thanks so much for listening and being here. And if you loved this episode, please take a moment to rate it on iTunes. I feel so honored when I read your reviews, and I would love to feature you on the podcast as a spotlight review. Also, find me on Instagram at Jaya Rose, and I would be so excited to share your story into my story. I just love seeing the feedback and that you're listening. So share it out on social media. Share it with somebody who you think it could benefit, because us showing up for other people is what this is all about. It's a ripple effect of change, and we do that by sharing. So thanks for being here, and I'll see you next time on Bliss Boss Talks.